Good, I have the full transcript. Now I'll write the improved version. What if I told you that the key to achieving firm, lasting erections after 60 has been sitting quietly within your own body all along? No pills, no side effects, no complicated routines. I know it sounds almost too good to be true, but I've spent over 20 years as a physician watching men discover exactly this, and the results never get old for me. I'm Dr. Ava Remington, and in my 2 decades of practice, I've sat across from hundreds of men who came into my office looking defeated. Men who'd stopped believing their bodies could work for them anymore. And what I discovered, through both research and real patient outcomes, is that most of them were missing something incredibly simple. Not a drug, not a surgery, just knowledge of 3 specific points on the body that, when gently tapped before intimacy, can help awaken the arousal system, increase blood flow, and support firm, reliable erections naturally. Today I'm going to walk you through all 3 of those points. I'll show you exactly where they are, how to find them, and precisely how to use them. I've also put together a 90-second sequence that combines all 3 into one simple routine you can start tonight. Men I've worked with, guys who had almost completely given up on their sex lives, have used this same method to reignite something they thought was gone for good. Before we get into the points themselves, I want to spend just a few minutes on the why, because I've found that when you understand what's happening inside your body, you actually do the technique better. You're more connected to it, and that connection matters more than you'd think. Here's what most men over 60 don't realize. The problem usually isn't testosterone. It's not even really a plumbing issue. It's your nervous system. As we age, our stress response gets more sensitive. Small amounts of anxiety, the kind you barely notice, are enough to constrict blood vessels and shut down the very systems your body needs to perform. And the older we get, the more that low-level tension becomes the background noise of daily life. Erections don't happen when you're stressed. I say this to every patient who walks through my door. They happen when your body is calm, your circulation is open, and your nervous system has been given the green light. The whole thing is essentially a relaxation response. And tapping specific pressure points is one of the most direct ways I know to trigger it. Now, I'll be honest with you. When I first started looking into acupressure as a complement to conventional treatment, I was skeptical. I was trained in Western medicine. My instinct was always to reach for a lab panel or a prescription pad. But over time, after seeing what worked, really worked, for real men in my practice, I had to follow the evidence wherever it led. And it led me here. When you apply light rhythmic pressure to specific points on the body, you stimulate nerve endings that send signals deep into the central nervous system. Those signals activate what's called the parasympathetic nervous system. I call it the body's green light mode. It tells your muscles to let go, your heart rate to settle, your blood vessels to open up. That's the exact physiological state you need for sexual function to kick in. I've seen men who'd been frustrated for years begin to notice real change after just a few sessions of this, not because their hormone levels magically improved overnight, but because their bodies were finally being allowed to do what they were already designed to do. The equipment was there all along. It just needed the right signal. All right, let's get into the first point, and this is where things get practical. I want you to be able to follow along right now as you're watching, so pay attention to the location. I'll describe it carefully. The first point is called CV6. In traditional Chinese medicine, it goes by C of energy. In Western anatomy, it sits roughly 2 finger widths directly below your belly button. To find it, just place 2 fingers horizontally beneath your navel. That's your landmark. The point is right there, in the center of your lower abdomen. Now, the first time I showed this to a patient, a man named Walter, early 70s, retired firefighter from outside of Phoenix, he looked at me with this expression I'd seen a dozen times before, equal parts disbelief and quiet hope. "You mean I just tap here?" he said, "right below my belly button, that's it?" I told him yes. And I told him what I'll tell you now. Yes, it really can be that simple. This area connects directly with deep pelvic nerves and blood vessels, the very systems responsible for erectile function. When you gently stimulate this point, you're essentially sending a signal that directs blood flow toward the lower abdomen and groin, eases tension in the pelvic floor, and begins priming the body for sexual arousal. Modern research on acupressure is increasingly supporting what Eastern practitioners have known for centuries about this region. Here's how to do it. Use 2 or 3 fingers together and tap gently but firmly right on that spot, 2 finger widths below your navel. Not hard. You're not trying to punch through your stomach. Think of it like the way you tap your fingers on a table when you're thinking. Steady, rhythmic, intentional. Do this for about 60 seconds. Breathe slowly and deeply as you tap. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Some men feel a subtle warmth building in the lower belly after 20 or 30 seconds. That's normal. That's circulation responding. Some feel a gentle tingling. Some don't feel much at first, and that's okay too. The effect is happening whether you feel it or not. One thing I tell all my patients, don't just tap mechanically. Tap with some awareness of what you're doing. You're waking up a part of your body that may have been running on low for a while. Give it some attention. Walter came back 2 weeks later. He didn't say a lot. He's not that kind of guy. But he shook my hand for about 4 seconds longer than he normally would. I knew what that meant, and I'll never forget it. Now, the second point addresses something that trips up a lot of men. And it's not what you'd expect. The issue is anxiety, not dramatic, panic attack level anxiety. Just that low hum of nervous energy that a lot of guys carry around without even naming it. The kind where your thoughts start racing right when you don't want them to, where you become hyper aware of whether things are working, and that awareness itself becomes the problem. The second point is called K1, the kidney 1 point. Its traditional name is bubbling spring. And here's the part that surprises everyone. It's on the bottom of your foot. I know, stay with me. To find K1, look at the sole of your foot. Right in the upper third of the sole, just below the ball of the foot, there's a small natural indentation when you curl your toes slightly. That's your target. It's roughly where the 2 pads of the foot meet in the middle. I never forget a patient I'll call George, 68 years old, a contractor from the suburbs of Chicago. Great guy, in decent physical shape, no major health issues. But every time he got close to intimacy, his mind would kick into overdrive. Heart pounding, thoughts racing, and then everything would just shut down. He described it to me like this. It's like my body and my brain are in 2 completely different rooms. When I introduced him to the K1 point, he looked at his foot for a long moment and then looked back at me like I might be pulling his leg. But he tried it. What K1 does is send a calming signal through the nervous system. When you tap or press firmly on the sole of the foot, particularly in that upper center region, it activates a reflex pathway that essentially tells your entire body to downshift. The clinical explanation involves the stimulation of plantar nerve fibers that connect to the spinal cord and then upstream to the brain's stress regulation centers. The practical explanation is simpler. It works. Tap the sole of your right foot for 20 to 30 seconds, then switch to the left. Use your fingertips or even your thumb if that's easier. Firm pressure, rhythmic tapping, same slow breathing as before. Some guys like to do this sitting on the edge of the bed, 1 foot crossed over the opposite knee. One question I get all the time, does it matter which foot first, or do you have to tap both? Tap both. And no, the order doesn't matter. Right then left is fine, or left then right. The bilateral stimulation is what activates the full calming effect through the nervous system. George called my office about 3 weeks after that appointment. He told my receptionist he just wanted to leave a message saying thanks. That was it. Just thanks. I've kept that one. There's something else that happens with K1 that I want you to know about. When you press your hands against the soles of your feet, you naturally pull your attention away from your head, away from the mental chatter, the performance pressure, the self-monitoring, and you ground it in your body. That downward shift in awareness is genuinely useful right before intimacy. It's not just the nerve stimulation, it's the intentional act of connecting with your physical self. Now, the third point might be the most surprising of all, because it's at the complete opposite end of your body. I had a patient, I'll call him Richard, 72, retired school teacher from the Atlanta area, who came to me with what he described as a disconnect. His words were, "Doc, my body's willing, but my mind just won't follow." He'd start to feel interested. Things would begin to respond, and then his thoughts would pull him out of the moment. Old memories, old doubts, the mental noise that builds up over years of small frustrations and quiet disappointments. For guys like Richard, the third point isn't optional. It's essential. The GV20 point, called 100 meetings, in traditional medicine sits at the very top of your head. To find it precisely, draw an imaginary line from the tip of one ear, straight up and over the top of your skull to the tip of the other ear. Now draw another imaginary line from the center of your forehead, straight back to the base of your skull. Where those two lines cross, that's GV20. It's the crown of the head, right at the center top. The reason this point matters for sexual function isn't immediately obvious, but here's how I explain it to patients. The brain has a lot of jobs, and when you're anxious or mentally cluttered, it dedicates a lot of resources to managing that noise. That leaves less bandwidth available for the parasympathetic, pro-arousal signals that need to get through. GV20, stimulation, through its connection to the governing vessel meridian, creates what I'd describe as a reset signal, a moment of stillness that quiets the mental static. Tap the crown of your head gently with 2 or 3 fingers for about 20 to 30 seconds. Close your eyes if you're comfortable doing so. Breathe slowly. Notice if your shoulders drop slightly. Notice if your jaw unclenches. Those are the signs it's working. I tap this point myself. I'll be straightforward with you. On long, stressful clinic days when I have 6 patients backed up and a stack of charts waiting, not for sexual reasons, just to reset, to come back to myself. And it genuinely helps. Richard came back to my office about a month after I'd taught him the sequence. He didn't look like the same man. He sat down, leaned forward a little, and said, "I feel like I got back a part of myself I thought I'd lost." That's not me overselling a technique. That's a real man describing a real experience. I've heard versions of that sentence more times than I can count. Now here's where it all comes together, because each of these 3 points does something different and important. But when you combine them into one short sequence, the effect is greater than the sum of the parts. I call it the sequence tap method. It takes less than 90 seconds. You can do it privately in a bathroom, a bedroom, wherever you have 90 quiet seconds to yourself before intimacy. Here's exactly how it works. Start with CV6, 2 finger widths below your belly button. Tap for 60 seconds with 2 or 3 fingers, slow and rhythmic. Breathe deeply. This activates pelvic blood flow and begins waking up the arousal system. Next, move to GV20, the crown of your head. Tap for 20 to 30 seconds. Let your mind slow down. This is the transition. You're shifting from physical activation to mental clarity. Finish with K1, the soles of your feet, upper center of the sole, beneath the ball of the foot, 20 to 30 seconds per foot. This grounds the nervous system and releases the residual tension that accumulates in the body throughout the day. 3 points, 3 steps. Done in under 90 seconds. I want to be clear about something. This isn't magic, and I'm not promising you a miracle. What I am telling you, based on 20 years of clinical practice, on research, and on the experiences of real patients I've actually sat across from, is that this works for a lot of men. Not every man, not in the same way, not always immediately, but consistently enough that I teach it to nearly every patient I see, dealing with age-related changes in sexual function. One of my patients told me recently that he looks forward to the ritual itself almost as much as what comes after. "It makes me feel like I'm taking care of myself," he said, "like I'm telling my body I'm paying attention to it." That's a real shift in relationship with your own body. And for men over 60 who've been running on autopilot for decades, that shift matters. Here's what I want you to do starting tonight. Don't overthink this. Don't wait for the right moment or until things feel more urgent. Set aside 2 minutes before bed works or before intimacy, whenever that arises. Run through the sequence. CV6, GV20, K1. Take 3 slow, deep breaths between each step. Let your body respond without pressure or expectation. Do this for 7 days straight. That's 1 week. Build it in like brushing your teeth. Something you just do without drama. And pay attention over that week, not just to any physical changes, but to how you feel mentally. Are you less tense going into intimate situations? Do you feel more present? More like yourself? That shift in confidence is often the first thing men notice, and it matters enormously because confidence and arousal are deeply connected. After 7 days, if you're noticing something positive, keep going. The effects tend to build over time. This isn't a one and done fix. It's a practice. And like any practice, it gets more natural and more effective the longer you do it. Some of the men I work with have shared this with their partners. That's completely up to you. This is your practice. But more than a few have told me that opening up this conversation created a kind of closeness they hadn't felt in years. Not just in the bedroom, but in general. The willingness to be honest about wanting intimacy, about working toward it, about caring enough to try. That kind of openness tends to be contagious in the best possible way. Now, before we wrap up, I want to say something that has nothing to do with technique. Something I've wanted to say to every man who's ever sat in my office and looked at the floor and asked me, in so many words, is it too late for me? No, it is not too late. I mean that clinically, and I mean it personally. The biology of aging is real, and I'm not going to stand here and pretend otherwise. Things change, responses slow down, but slower is not the same as gone. And the gap between where a lot of men are and where they could be with the right tools and the right mindset is far larger than most of them realize. You've spent decades showing up for work, for family, for everyone else. This is about showing up for yourself, for the part of you that still desires connection, still wants to feel capable and present and alive in your own body. That part of you hasn't aged out. It's just been waiting for the right signal. You have the method now. You know where the points are. CV6, 2 finger widths below the navel. GV20, the crown of the head. K1, the upper sole of each foot. You know the sequence, you know the timing, you know the breathing. The only thing left is to start. If this video helped you, if it gave you something practical or gave you even just a small bit of hope, please take a second to like it and share it. There are a lot of men out there who need this information and don't know it exists. Your share might be the reason one of them finds it. And leave a comment below. Tell me which of the 3 points you're most curious about, or just type, I'm ready, if you're committing to the 7-day practice. I read these. I want to know how you're doing. You're not alone in this. And your story, I promise you, is not finished.